Good morning, boys and girls. It's Miss Vicky. Did you meet my new student? Isn't he cute? His name is Rolo. And because you can't be in a classroom with me, then he's come to be my student. When we last were together, we were studying about Saul and David from the Old Testament. We're not going to go there today because we're going to leave that for when we get to come back together at the church to continue our Sequoia Kids studies. Today we're going to go to the New Testament. If you remember, the first 4 books in our New Testament are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those first 4 books of the Bible are called the Gospels, and the Gospel is what they call the good news. Now, the good news is the good news about Jesus Christ, his birth, his life, his death, and his resurrection. The next book of the Bible is the book of Acts. And the book of Acts is the story of the beginning of the church. Our story today comes from the book of Acts. Our verse is Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, the one the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned, brought the money to the apostles, and laid it at their feet. That's in Acts 4:36. We learn an awful lot from this verse about this man named Joseph. First of all, he was a Levite, which means, as we remember from the study of the law, the Levites were the ones who were the priests and the teachers. We learn also that he's from the island of Cyprus. That's going to be important later on in our lesson. He was also a special man to the apostles because they gave him a special name. They called him Barnabas, even though his name was Joseph. And the meaning of the name Barnabas is son of encouragement. He was an encourager. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at how Barnabas encouraged others on his Christian journey. The first thing he did was he sold a field. He brought the money to the apostles and laid it at their feet. It was a very generous thing to do because they had a lot of widows who needed food. And so they'd take that money, they would buy the food for the widows and then distribute them so that everybody had plenty of food to eat. This is how the beginning of the church started, was taking care of one another. Barnabas was a really nice guy. And if we get a map here of the area, right here is where we begin the story of the church. You see down here is Egypt, and then up here we have Israel right here. The city of Jerusalem is here. We're going to be traveling up here to Antioch and to Tarsus and here in Damascus. This whole area here, right here we're going to be talking about our story. Even the island of Cyprus, which is where Barnabas was from. Now, there was a man in the book of Acts named Paul, and he was a man who disliked Christians until right here on the road to Damascus, he had God came to him and said, "Why are you persecuting me?" And he became a Christian. But then when he went back to the city of Jerusalem, they didn't want to invite him into the church. They didn't want to have anything to do with him because he had been putting Christians in jail. And so they were scared of him. The one person who reached out to him and said, "Let's give this guy a chance," that was Barnabas. He was an encourager. He was someone who saw the potential in Paul and reached out to him. So the two of them go back here to Antioch, right here, and they teach up there. And the Bible tells us that in Antioch, this was the first place where the followers of the way, which were what they were called before they were called Christians, they were first called Christians at Antioch. That's an interesting fact. They decide to go on a missionary journey. And when they go on, Paul and Barnabas, they leave Antioch and they go to the island of Cyprus. Remember, that's where Barnabas was from. They take with them a young man by the name of John Mark. And he goes up with them to this area called Pamphylia. And there, for some reason, either he gets scared, he gets homesick, we don't know why, he leaves them and goes back to Jerusalem. And that leaves Paul and Barnabas to go through this entire area without him. It caused a lot of trouble, a lot of hardship for them not to have him along. When they go back, they decide to go on a second missionary journey. And when they do go on that second missionary journey, Barnabas wants to take John Mark. He wants to give him a second chance. Paul says, no way. We're not taking him with us. He deserted us the first trip. We can't afford to have a guy who can't stick through the trip with us. Well, they have a sharp dispute. In other words, they argue about this. And what they decide to do is to go in two different directions. Barnabas takes John Mark and he goes back to the island of Cyprus, back to his home country. Maybe he thought it would be easier for John Mark to preach to people that he knew here on the island. And Paul goes up into this area. Boy, on the second missionary journey, he goes all the way over here. He really travels far, and he takes with him a man named Silas. And that is the very last that we hear of Barnabas from our Bible. We don't know what happens to him, but it's not the last that we hear of John Mark. We find out later on in the book of 2 Timothy and in the book of Philemon that John Mark is a great help to Paul when he's in prison. He gets arrested because he's a Christian. And John Mark is helpful to him, and he tells some of the people from the other places to watch out for him and to listen to him and to take care of him because he's a good man. And so John Mark and Paul later on, they heal their dispute. And so we find that let's go back to our verse, please. Barnabas the encourager is what I like to call him. He, number one, he stuck up for his family, didn't he? Number two, he was generous. He gave to the poor. Number three, he stuck up for people he didn't even know. He stuck up for Paul when the others in Jerusalem didn't want anything to do with him. I really like Barnabas. I want to be a Barnabas. I want to encourage you to read your Bibles. I want to encourage you to sing Bible songs. I want to encourage you to help out your parents. Be good to your brothers and sisters. I want to encourage you to actually make a card. Miss Vicki made this card to you. It says on the front of it, a note for you. I made this really cute little picture. Don't you like that? It says, until we can be together again, remember, I love you, Miss Vicki. You can make a card like this yourself at home. Until we meet again, I love you, I'm praying for you, and we'll see you soon. Bye.